In most situations, and I say most, not all, because some of you all are very delinquent and have been running from the IRS, but in most situations, the IRS must suspend an interview, which means stop it, they got to cut it out, if the taxpayer requests to consult with a representative, such as that tax attorney, a CPA, which is a certified public accountant, or enrolled agent. Okay?
Welcome to the Tax Relief with Timalyn Bowens podcast. Are you behind on taxes? Is the IRS threatening you or your business? Are you overwhelmed and confused about how to resolve your tax issues? Let's join Timalyn as she explains your options and how she may be able to help. Timalyn Bowens is America's favorite EA.
Hey, family. Welcome to episode 33. Per usual, I am excited to be talking taxes with you on this Friday morning, but I do have a confession to make. I'm a little bit disappointed today. And no, it's not you, it's me. I'm a little disappointed because it's been brought to my attention that I have failed you, my listeners. So if you've been riding with me, we're at episode 33, 1 through 32. You know I have a personal mission to fill the tax literacy gap one taxpayer at a time. But it was brought to my attention there was, or is, a huge gap still in one of the things that I talk about so very often, and that is the definition of tax representation. So in today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about what tax representation actually is. I realize that I always refer to it. I give a short definition, but for a lot of you, it's still taxonese, and I need to break it down a little bit. So I hope that you accept this episode as my olive branch and apology. Now, before I get into that, breaking it down, I would like to say thank you. Thank you not only for listening to this podcast, but for following me on the different social media platforms, including YouTube. I am so happy to announce that this week we reached 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And that in part is thanks to you for sharing the channel, subscribing to the channel, engaging with it. And I'm so excited to see how much more it's going to grow, how many more people I'll be able to help and fill the tax literacy gap, right? So again, thank you. Please continue to share the page with your loved ones and friends. If you're a new listener, in the notes, the gems are always going to be in the notes of the show. Please make sure you go and follow me on YouTube. But let's get into this episode. Let me redeem myself, right? Because I don't want to fail you when my mission is to help you, right? So we're going to talk about tax representation, what it is. We're going to look at who is entitled to tax representation, who can represent taxpayers, which I won't get into too much because I've actually done 2 episodes to talk about who can represent taxpayers. So we'll have those links in the notes so you can go check them out. But I'm also going to give you a tidbit. What if you can't afford tax representation? So stick around to the end and I'll let you know what you can do if you can't afford representation. All right. So this whole thing came about because I had someone retain me this summer. And 3 days before they retained me to represent them, they called the IRS and set up a payment arrangement that they could not afford. Okay. Now, one of your rights as a taxpayer is to not pay an amount that would put you into a financial hardship. that's one of the nice things about hiring a professional is because they understand these rights. They can help you navigate them. But for some reason, this person got out of their analysis paralysis. They set up this arrangement, even though they knew they were going to retain me later in the week. So what I realized is that they didn't understand what representation was, because if they did, they wouldn't have went and spoken with the IRS and then turn around and hire me to speak with the IRS, right? And then as I began to think about it, I've had other clients do the same thing. So again, let me redeem myself here. So tax representation, and this is directly from the IRM, which is the Internal Revenue Manual. It says that taxpayers have the right to representation. So this is in the rule book for your revenue agents, officers. Everybody knows. Now you know. It's in the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. You have the right to representation. So what that actually means for you is that instead of you communicating with the IRS, you have the right to hire somebody to communicate with them for you on your behalf. Now, because it is debt, you will still receive written communication because they have to give that to you. However, the IRS can't make you appear in a meeting or an appeal if you've hired a representative. The IRS cannot call you directly if you have hired a representative. Now, part of that, when you hire somebody to represent you, they have to fill out a 2848, which I've talked about in previous episodes. A 2838, I'm sorry, a 2848, excuse me, is a taxpayer or a tax power of attorney. And this is the paperwork that allows somebody to step into your shoes and handle your tax issue. So let's talk about it. Let's go back. It's in the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So who is actually entitled to representation? According to the IRS, all taxpayers have the right to retain an authorized representative of their choice to represent them in dealings with the IRS. Now, in order to be authorized, this means a tax professional that is credentialed. And like I said, I'm not going to harp on this a lot because I've talked about it in previous episodes, but those professionals have to be credentialed. So that is a tax attorney, that is a certified public accountant, or an enrolled agent, such as myself. Now, as an enrolled agent, I specialize in taxes. I've actually taken a test that's put out by the IRS, passed all three parts, and that gives me the authority to represent taxpayers before them. Okay? So if a taxpayer, as I mentioned before, has an interview with an IRS agent officer, they can retain representation so they can get a substitute for them to attend the meeting. Now, taxpayers who retain representation don't have to attend with their representative unless, there's always an exception, the IRS formally summons them to appear. So, in most situations, and I say most, not all, because some of you all are very delinquent and have been running from the IRS. But in most situations, the IRS must suspend an interview, which means stop it. They got to cut it out, if the taxpayer requests to consult with a representative, such as that tax attorney, a CPA, which is a certified public accountant, or enrolled agent. Okay? Now, you can't just say, hey, I have representation. You need to be able to show the 2848 where you've signed and given that person your tax power of attorney. Now, for me, when I fill out this form and they've signed it, by they, I mean the client and I've signed it, I'll provide them with a signed copy of the form. I also provide it to the IRS. This form is on file with the centralized authorization file, also referred to as the CAF unit. So it takes about 45 days typically for this 2848 to process. And anytime the IRS pulls up the taxpayer's account, once I have power of attorney, my name pops up as well. So that means they cannot call the taxpayer. They have to call me because I'm the representative. Anything they mail out to the taxpayer also has to come to me. So for a lot of people who are scared of speaking with the IRS, this is an answer to prayer, right? If you may be thinking, hey, that absolutely would be an answer to prayer for me, but I can't really afford to hire an attorney. I can't really afford a certified public accountant, and I can't really afford an enrolled agent. Don't panic and run away from the problem. Okay. Just like I say, episode after episode, I may not be the best fit to work with you and solve the problem. Now, I would love the privilege to see if we're a good fit to work with each other, but you may not be able to afford it. And I will be upfront with you about that. If you can't afford representation, you still have the right to it. So the IRS has a program, we refer to it as LITC, which is Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. Okay. You can find one of these LITCs, find the one that's near you by visiting the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic's page on irs.gov. You can also call, which you all know how it is calling different IRS lines. It may be a little bit quicker to go online, but there is a number that's toll free, and it's 1-800-829-3676. Now, I say over and over and over again, the IRS definition of broke is not your definition of broke, right? So there is certain criteria that you need to meet to make sure that you actually qualify to participate in the low income taxpayer clinic, right? Now, I'm not saying, oh my goodness, it's so hard to get in. No, if you think that you would qualify, reach out to them and check out the criteria, okay? I just gave you 2 resources to be able to reach out to them. Now, I will tell you this because a lot of people get confused and they're like, well, you're licensed through the IRS, you must work with them. And you may have just listened to what I said about the low income taxpayer clinic and thought the same thing. I'm licensed through the Internal Revenue Service, but I do not work for the Internal Revenue Service. All right. I am an independent tax professional that, yes, I work with them on behalf of my clients, but not for them. The low income taxpayer clinic is also independent from the IRS, and it's also independent from the Taxpayer Advocate Service. All right. So the Taxpayer Advocate Service, or TAS, they work on your behalf if the systems that IRS has in place aren't working correctly and they're abusing your taxpayer rights. The low income taxpayer clinic is independent because they advocate for you to make sure that the payments you are making don't put you in a financial hardship, right? So the same thing that a certified public accountant or an enrolled agent or tax attorney would do for you, they're going to do the same thing and fight for your rights. All right. So the clinics represent individuals whose income is below a certain level. So again, your definition of broke in the IRS is different. If you have children in paid martial arts, you have 4 different car payments, yeah, you probably aren't going to qualify for the LITC. All right. But if you do, the LITC can represent you in an audit, appeals, and tax collection disputes before the IRS and in court. Okay. So that's even one up on me because I can represent you before the IRS in an audit, in an appeal, in a tax collection dispute, but I cannot represent you in court. The only folks that can do that are your tax attorneys, all right, or the U.S. court practitioners. Okay. So, with all of that being said, you may be thinking, I kind of still don't know where to start. I have a better understanding of what representation is. I want somebody to stand on my behalf to handle this appeal. I want somebody to look at my financial information and my transcripts and to see what I can actually afford. But maybe I don't qualify for the low income taxpayer clinic. You can yet have a consultation with me. And like I said, I may not be the best person, but I'll still invite you to book a consultation with me. Now, if you're new here, you haven't heard this before, but I have all of this free content online, and you have resources like the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. If you work with me, it's not free. Okay. So if you do want to work with me for a consultation to get a roadmap about your situation and what should be done, you can visit www.bowenstaxsolutions.com, okay, and book the tax relief evaluation call. This is a consultation, okay? You need to make sure that you have your actual questions. It's best if you know the amount that the IRS is alleging that you owe, right? Because the IRS is made up of human beings. That amount may not be right. You also want to make sure that you have a rough idea of how much money you're actually bringing in right now, as well as your latest tax notice. Now, why are you going to have all this information? It's because during this consultation, I'm going to provide you with a roadmap and give you an idea of what you qualify for and a customized solution for you. Now, that's why it's a paid call, because you're going to actually know what steps to take after we get off the call. If we're vibing good together, you'll be invited to retain me within the next 14 days. And if you choose to do so, the money you pay for the consultation will roll towards retaining me. If you choose not to, best wishes to you, but now you know what to do to get your problem resolved. So maybe you can handle it yourself. I won't judge your tax competency. Never will, won't start now. You may find somebody that you work with better. That is all fine and dandy. I won't take it personal because it doesn't have to be me, but you need to make sure you get the help you need. Okay? Because back taxes shouldn't ruin your life, but you have to take the first step and book that call. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen today. I'd like to thank Jim Ray Consulting Services for helping me get this message out to you. I hope you found the information helpful. Did you know 1 in 50 people have a tax problem? Please share this episode with your friends and family because you never know who may need help. Again, thanks for listening. Hey, just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It provides a framework and possible solutions for solving your tax problems, but it is not legally binding. Please consult your tax professional regarding your specific tax situation.